So the book starts with Dan Pena introducing himself. And what Dan Pena is really doing is differentiating himself from other seminar gurus. So he talks about the self-development industry, which is highly, relying on remanufacturing content that was, conventional wisdom. He talks about conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom is written maybe in spiritual books or, traditional self-development books. And the current modern day self-help gurus just take that content and remanufacturing it and remanufacture it. And this kind of content, you cannot really measure the results of this content because they tend to be more on the spiritual side. And hence, people keep coming back and the whole industry is surviving on this. So he talks a little bit about that. And he talks that he's explaining that I'm not one of these type of coaches. If you want to make money, if you want to create wealth, if you want financial coaching, then you come to me. That's the message that he's providing in the first chapter. And he talks about his credibility, how he created this company, how many business transactions he has been involved in, how many phone calls he has been involved in, and how many decisions he has taken over the course of his business life. So he talks about all of these things. And then he talks about, the corporate world. And he talks about that there are a lot of misconceptions about business, that business is something that is, the environment is very nice and, follow your passion. And a lot of nice stuff is said about business. But he talks about that when it comes to business and finance and money, he says you cannot trust people. And he goes on sharing personal stories of how when there is a lot of money on the table, integrity is the first thing that goes out of the window. When it comes to money, really, you cannot trust anybody. When there is nothing to fight for, you can trust almost anybody because there's nothing to fight for. But when it comes to money, when that gets involved on the table, then friends can become enemies. Even families can break on this one topic. So he's really exposing the harsh realities of human nature around money, around the subject of money. People change, their opinions change, their demeanor change around this one subject. And this may not happen at $1,000, $10,000, even a $50,000 level, but the bigger the transactions get, the more treacherous the environment becomes. And after being in the trenches being in business, especially this kind over the last 2.5 years, I know that this is the case. There are very few people that you can actually trust when it comes to a lot of money. So he is really talking about that. And then he's talking about risks and reward. The bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. And that is so true in the business world, is that the opportunities that have the most reward associated with it has a lot of risk associated with it also. And this is the reason why the reward is so big. It's actually because of the risk. Because the risk pushes people away. The bigger the sacrifice necessary to make that amount of money, the bigger the risk associated with making that big of money, the more people it will push away from that opportunity. So hence, the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward, because there's going to be less competition. So if you are someone who can handle pressure, and the higher the pressure, the less there will be competition. There is a saying, there is lonely at the top because not that many people can handle that kind of pressure. So the next phase or the next chapter, he talks about pressure. And he says that if we were to put a ladder between two buildings, on the first floor, and we put $1,000 on one end, and we ask you to move, and if you can move from one building to another using this ladder, you can have the $1,000. Most of the people will be able to do that. But if you put the same building at a 15 floor level, people are not going to do that. But the scenario is almost exactly the same. There is the same building, same ladder. It's the same thing you have to do. It's just the height is different. What has happened is that the risk factor has changed and the level of pressure has changed. Still, there might be some people who decide to do it. But what happens if you keep this stair to floor number 50 or 60? Virtually nobody is going to be able to do it. And that is the level of pressure these high performers, like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, these big guys are used to. They're used to big ticket items. They're used to a lot of regulations. They're used to their public perceptions and, like public humiliation. I mean, there are so many things that come when you start making big money, and in the process of making big money, that virtually most people melt under pressure and they give up. So he talks about pressure as a fundamental force in business, especially when you want to make a big amount of money. And he says anybody can make $10,000, $20,000 over a weekend, but what about the big deals? What is required to do the big deals? And then he talks about sacrifices. How he missed many Christmases with his family. He couldn't make it to the school game for his children, and what effect this has on the family unit. The children always remember it, and they can also get scarred, and your relationship with your wife can get affected. I mean, there are times when an entrepreneur who's involved in these big transactions may plan a vacation and at the last moment decide not to go and just send the wife and kids to the vacation. So these kind of things can really create a lot of stress in your home, a lot of stress in your environment. And so he's really being transparent in the book that all of this is going to happen. And he also compares himself with other gurus, because they don't talk about this kind of stuff. They make they create a very rosy picture that attracts a lot of people, and then they just buy the products from them. But nobody talks about this kind of harsh reality, of business and life. And this is true. As I'm executing this model, I know that my whole family life has been affected. My personal relationships have been affected, and my health also has been affected. And all of this is written in the book that this is going to happen. So he's really kind of shocking you and making you aware that this is most likely going to happen to you. And he says, if that makes you shy away from the opportunity, or that shocks you, and that discourages you, then you should close this book right now and move on to something else, because this isn't for you. And when he says this isn't for you, he really means that this isn't for you. He really means that this isn't for most people. When I attended his talk in London in 2018, when I met him for the first time, he said, this thing that I'm sharing with you will work only for 1% or maximum 2% people in the audience. This is not for everybody. So even people who go to his castle, most of them especially in the first seminar, a lot of them quit because they realize this is not for them. And this is really the truth. He's not trying to challenge you or trying to, do a reverse psychology, or a negative psychology on you. No, he's actually speaking the truth. This is the case. Because you could make an argument of why it is not worth it. There is a whole argument to be made that why it is not worth it to pursue such a big amount of money. So, and this is the reason why people convince themselves and give up and resign and just do something else. So these are the first initial chapters, and we're going to talk about what happens further in the next part. If you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.